Previously, just a recap of what happened previously. Looking back at that first bit, I thought perhaps I was particularly angry when I was talking about the derating of socialism. And that's not entirely the feminist fault. In fact, feminism have been used as a pawn by governments that claim to be left-wing, but really aren't. They're not prepared to do anything about class inequalities, because if they did do anything about class inequalities, even promised to do class inequalities, they would lose investment. But at the same time, because they are left-wing and have to appear to be left-wing, they want to make it look like they're champions of the underdog, because that role of being on the left is you've got to be championing the underdog. So feminism gives them the opportunity to be champions of the underdog whilst doing nothing for the actual underdogs, which is lower classes. The lower classes have been made up of both men and women. So in fact, both men and women suffer from the extraction technique that is the exploitation of feminism. That's not entirely the feminists' fault. Feminists have been exploited as pawns, or feminism as an idea has been exploited as a pawn. But in that sense, that is another parallel between the usage of feminism by the left and the usage of fascistic views by the far right. That's what the far right do. They use a scapegoat to avoid their responsibility for dealing with actual inequalities. As I say, that's not the feminist fault. That is the way feminism is being exploited. Moving forward, as I said, I was probably a little bit controversial towards the end there by saying you're not a Nazi. I don't think that's too controversial. I think most people agree you're not a Nazi. But I did kind of infringe Godwin's law a little. I think things get a little more controversial here near the beginning because I do talk a little bit about rape, I think, which is a touchy subject, and even I feel uncomfortable talking about it. But I'm not a big fan of marriage anyway, so I can wash my hands of it anyway. So here's the second part, and I'm hoping it's going to end on a positive note, because this middle third ends with me talking positively about certain feminists I do think are quite good.
Arguments like this are weak. Worse, they benefit the other side because they're repeating the radical statements that are used as recruitment tools. Radical feminism, like all radical ideologies, catches people at low points when they feel angry, hurt, and alone. This anti-feminist tendency to mock feminists.
I'm not a massive fan of Harry Potter. I'm more of a Lemony Snicket man myself. But have you seen Prisoner of Azkaban? I'm not changing the subject. I mean, you'll find out. I'm going around to it. The scene in Prisoner of Azkaban where the students are taught how to deal with boggart. Boggart takes the form of your worst fears. It's like kind of Room 101, but in Harry Potter world. It lives in wardrobes. You know, it's the monster in the wardrobe. The spell used to dispel the boggart is ridiculous. When you spell ridiculous, it turns into something laughable, something invisible, something you take the piss out of. I very much doubt that J.K. Rowling said take the piss out of her books as for children. That's why people mock feminism. And when you say they feel threatened by it, feel threatened by change. Some do. There's some that feel threatened by change, and it's some tradcom worrying about pink being taken out of Toys R Us. I'm not worried about their pink aisle disappearing from Toys R Us. I think that'd be a good thing. But when you're talking about them making threats, and not only that, by creating an environment in which there is a constant feeling of oppression. I don't mean oppression in a political sense. An oppressive environment. If feminists create an oppressive environment, the only way to alleviate that is to mock them. Right? We mock them because to not mock them gives them power over people. We mock them to take the power away from them, so they don't have the power to scare people, or the power to make people feel uncomfortable, or the power to make people feel oppressed by them. That is why people mock feminists. this is really quite surprising. I think when people mock feminists, they are actually punching up, because they're attacking the people that are trying to suppress them. Bear in mind, I've talked about how radical feminism is a bit like a cult, and it's a bit like a religion. So take the piss out of feminism is just the same way as lapsed Catholics take the piss out of the church, you know? It's a part of the deprogramming process. Make it ridiculous. If you make it ridiculous, it has no power over you.
Reminds people who are hurting that the world is an inherently aggressive place, and they seek out radical groups that will give them some semblance of protection and belonging.
Potentially the world is a hostile place for everyone. And we all have different ways of dealing with that. And some of us use comedy, and some of us use philosophy. Some of us are driven to hate movements, which is what the feminists are doing. I think you should develop a sense of humour instead. Maybe that might be a better way of dealing with the fact that the world is a hostile place. Or try Taoism. Taoism is very good for dealing with the fact that the world is a hostile place. There's a reason why I've got the Excalibur clip, one of the first things on my list, even before I started producing my own content. There's two things saved on the list. One is a Alison Tim video, which is really good, and I wanted to share it with a title that would be, funnily enough, less provocative to feminists, because I thought it was really such a good point about male victims of domestic violence. I wanted it to be able to show it to people who weren't anti-feminist, so they go, oh yeah, that makes sense. And the second video on there is Excalibur, which is the scene when Merlin tells Arthur about the dragon to rest in the arms of the dragon. I think it's a very good expression of the Taoist mentality. One way or the other, we all have to deal with the fact that the world's a hostile place. The way the feminists chosen to deal with the fact that the world's a hostile place is to blame another group for the feeling of hostility, rather than just accepting it as part of the chaos of life. Problem blamed is a problem that is a burden on people who already have problems of their own, isn't it? Let's have a little read from this book. This is Norah Vincent, Self-Made Man. So what Norah Vincent's done is she's gone undercover as a man. She's a feminist. She's gone undercover as a man. In one of the latter chapters, she spent some time at the Mythopoetic, on the Mythopoetic meetings, which it was a sort of men's movement that had a kind of blossoming briefly at the end of the 80s, early 90s. They go on retreats into the woods and bang drums and talk about their feelings and stuff. Other guys at the retreat shared their drawings, and a pattern started to emerge. Two guys had drawn their heroes as Atlas, holding the world on his shoulders. One of them was a family man. He said he was going through a rough time in his marriage. He was really feeling the burden of being the safety net, the breadwinner, and Mr. Fix-It of his household. I'm tired, he said. When Paul asked him to explain more about the significance of Atlas, he said, I guess I think that if I hold it all together, if I take care of everything and everyone, that eventually I'll be loved. But the price is my life. I'm trying to do the impossible, so I guess I'm really Sisyphus too. It was an insightful combination, and perhaps the perfect depiction of modern man at his most beset and wasted, taking the world on his shoulders and rolling it uphill. Being the man in charge brought with it a whole host of burdens and anxieties that seldom if ever occurred to me or the feminists I knew. We saw it from our side, and from there it seemed pretty damn good to be in power. Make decisions, make choices, to escape the homemaker's gulag. For ambitious women, having a career was a lot better than changing a millionth diaper or staring at the yellow wallpaper. When you're feeling trapped and disenfranchised, it didn't register that being the working stiff in the grey flannel suit isn't any picnic either. The other guy, who had drawn his hero as Atlas, emphasized this aspect. Beside his Atlas, in the margins of his picture, he'd also drawn Hercules, the more expected hero. When Paul asked him what it meant, he said, well, you know, Hercules is looking for the old golden apples, and Atlas is envious. He says, I've got a real job. You couldn't put it more succinctly. To these guys, going to work and supporting the family was a man's job, still. And it was hard. There was no vacation in it, and you weren't going to get many women to see or admit to that. Worst of all, holding up the world in this way wasn't just painful and tiring, it was also one of the most vulnerable poses a man could assume. And this is almost certainly something that would never occur to a woman. See, said the guy, Atlas can't protect himself in that position. Anybody could just walk right up to him and kick him in the balls. There it was again, the fear of conflict and vulnerability, the assumption that even your most basic job in life made you weak to enemies and contained within it the invitation to attack. And all of this was built into the mission of a man's life, his sense of his own masculinity. As always, women were an integral part of that conflict. To these guys, being Atlas didn't literally mean supporting the world, it meant supporting their little piece of it. Being Atlas was about being the guy who takes care of all the pesky logistical and often physical hassles so the daily life could run smoothly. It meant worrying so that the wife and kids didn't have to, and that alone was burden enough for any man. He could have been a carpenter, as one of the Atlas guys was, or a corporate mogul. It didn't matter. It was still the same feeling. Now, as I say, the world is a hostile environment for everyone, and men do feel burdened. If somebody is blaming you for their feelings of anxiety, that's just putting more burden onto his shoulders, isn't it? How many people's problems do we have to take onto our shoulders? How comfortable do women have to feel before it's time to stop making men feel more uncomfortable? How unburdened do women have to be before it's time to stop being burdensome for men? That's the question.
It doesn't matter, as some claim, that a relatively small portion of America self-identifies as feminist. Even fewer Americans identify as evangelical Christians, but we all know that the evangelical movement has a lot of power. Because evangelicals have the ability to get their message out, and their message is that traditional Christian values are under attack, people join the fight for morality itself. This is the radical feminist message as well.
We also know that everyone wants to take the piss out of Christians. It's the same. Exactly the same reason. They've got an awful lot of power, and they act like everyone's moral superiors. So we take the piss out of them. The same true. Evangelical Christians and radical feminists, they all act like they are moral superiors, and they've got an awful lot of power. So we take the piss out of them.
Instead of debating the real issues surrounding women in the workforce, the lack of family leave for workers of all genders, and the extremely serious issues involving women's safety around the world, the media, both mainstream and alternative, is fighting over radicalized nonsense.
Maybe it is the fact that we got, an economic system which workers' rights have been undermined over a number of years, and the division between rich and poor has grown wider as a result. They know there's going to be unrest, so the media are pushing anyone that creates division between the ordinary people, so we're not all on the same side. Maybe that's what it's about. Maybe that's why right now the media is giving more attention to radicals. It's not our fault the media is giving more attention to radicals. I'm concerned about it too. I'm concerned about it because of the harm it does to men. You are concerned about it because of the harm it does to the reputation of feminism. As far as I'm concerned, that means that we both see the radical feminists as the enemy. Alright, okay, well, we've got an alliance, haven't we?
In doing so, the media has perpetuated the lie that radical feminism is real feminism, and it isn't.
The trouble is, of course, they'll say that you're not the real feminist. They'll say they're the real feminist and you're not. So how do we tell which one is lying? Is it the case that real feminists always tell the truth and that the non-real feminists always tell a lie? In which case, if I said to you, if I was to ask them which one's the real feminist, right, then whatever the answer you give, it must be the opposite one. I know how this trick works. Okay. There's no way of telling, is there? I mean, seriously. You can tell us that you're the real feminist, and they'll tell us that they're the real feminist. You know, seriously, Amanda Marcotte writes a little article saying, hey, these are the anti-feminists, and some of them are feminists. Listing people that are feminists and going, they're an anti-feminist because they don't agree with her. They're not her breed of feminists. You'll probably be on her list soon. You know, you already excommunicated.
Radicalism is always a funhouse mirror of the core of a movement. There's a reason we talk about that horseshoe effect. And it's odd to me that both radfems and anti-feminists are blind to the horseshoe effect that they're perpetuating. They sound more like each other than any moderates, either among feminists or the so-called men's right camp, advocating for more resources for suicide prevention and military support. I say so-called because the legitimate grievances that men's advocates have don't have anything to do with rights, and they have everything to do with psychological supports in male-dominated areas.
Some of them do have to do with rights. For example, the father's rights, for a start. There's custody rights, that's a right. There's reproductive rights. A man doesn't have any choice over whether he becomes a father or not. He can be tricked into impregnating a woman, and then she can go to full term and then claim child support. He can be put in jail for not being able to pay child support. There's fathers that can't see their children because the mothers don't allow them. They've still got to pay more than they can afford. They wind up in debt, and they wind up in debtor's prison. It's the only thing that you can go to debtor's prison for. The only debt you can go to debtor's prison for is child support debt. And he can't even, and then still even can't see their children. I think that is a rights issue, Liana. That is a legal rights issue. That's not just to do with psychology. There are psychological issues, I think. I think one of them is our reluctance to acknowledge your own vulnerability, and our reluctance to admit to suffering is one of the reasons why there hasn't been a men's rights movement for a long time. It's always been a very much a minority thing. We were talking earlier about helping girls with their self-esteem. That's not a rights issue, is it? You know, it's not a legal right, is it? You don't have a legal right to have positive self-esteem. So that was a strange attack to say, oh, they call themselves so-called men's rights activists, but it's not really about rights. Well, actually, as I said, some of it is. But helping girls with self-esteem isn't about rights. Admittedly, as I said later, you know, I want to protect the self-esteem of boys. But you're saying it's not about rights, it's about psychology. So it's the self-esteem. Why are you making a distinction?
This is opposed to the legitimate rights that certain regressive lawmakers are attempting to deny women, mostly in regards to bodily autonomy. There is a larger persistent effort in government to overturn Roe versus Wade than to get rid of Citizens United.
Now, you're talking about rights you stand to lose. Whereas we were just talking about rights we stood to gain. For example, father's custody rights and male reproductive rights. And I could add to that, of course, bodily integrity rights, because, you know, male circumcision is still legal. See, I don't know how to interpret it when you say the only legitimate issues are not rights issues. So either you don't recognise that there are rights issues, or you think that the rights issues we have aren't legitimate, which of course is, you know, and a right is just a concept, isn't it, until it exists. Before we have it, we have to believe we deserve to have it. We believe we should have it. Obviously, you don't believe we should have it. Are we quite interested? Do you think that that's reasonable? Men to have reproductive rights? Imagine it's your son. Imagine it's your son and his girlfriend's told him that she's on the pill, and he says it's all right. And he's foolish, maybe. He believes her. Why would she lie? Boys always told they've got responsibility to not get a girl pregnant for her, right? And so you look after her, you make sure you don't get her pregnant. He's not warned to not get her pregnant to look after himself. So if she assures him, it's all right, I'm on the pill, it must be all right then. Because he's not told he's protecting himself Is he? And then she dumps him, and then 6 months later she says, "Oh, by the way, I'm having your son. I'm having your child. And now you've got to pay me child support." Isn't going to say whether he is going to be its father or not. Do you think he should have a right to be able to say, "Hey, I wasn't the bargain. You told me you were on the pill"? I don't know. Do you think it's legitimate or not? Liana, it's your son. Don't imagine you had a son. Some girl's tricked him, told him that she's on the pill, gets pregnant by him, and then he's got to pay out a third of his wages for the next 18 years of his life, and he's just starting out. And he's trying to get through college. I think that's right. I think that's not a legitimate cause for complaint. Then that's your opinion, isn't it? You know, there are some campaigners that would like to remove the standard mens rea from cases of harassment. Somebody doesn't even need to know that they're doing anything wrong for them to be guilty. That's a shifting of rights. That's a removal of rights. So if we're talking about rights we stand to lose, yeah, we stand to lose rights as well. So I think a bit of a problem here with you saying legitimate rights issues, because I'm wondering, either you don't realise there are rights issues, or you realise there are rights issues but you don't think they're legitimate. If you don't think they're legitimate, that's kind of a bit offensive, really. Just because it's offensive doesn't mean you don't have the right to say it, of course. I do very firmly believe in everyone's right to free speech and free thought. So you can think what you like and say what you like. I'm just interested to know whether you think our rights are legitimate or not.
Funding for the Zika virus has been stalled because of the fight over Planned Parenthood. Some people in power still don't believe that a woman can be raped by her own husband.
Alright, this is quite a tricky one and a touchy subject, but mouse rape was only recognised as rape very recently in almost all countries. I'm going to say very recently, I mean the last 20 years or so. But even before it was made illegal, you'd be hard pressed to find a rape that wasn't breaking another law. Because a physical assault would still have been illegal. It would still have been illegal to be violent towards your wife. How could it occur without there being violence involved? What form would it take that wouldn't already be illegal in some way or other? So I know that's a difficult issue, because you say, well, yeah, but it should still be recognised as a rape. Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't the case that that men were having sex with wives that were unwilling prior to it being made illegal. You just have a look at the comedy of the time. Men made jokes about not having sex for years all the time. Men were making jokes about, is it my birthday? You know, there were those sort of jokes that implied that there were quite a lot of marriages that were sexless. There were quite a lot of sexless marriages. There wouldn't have been sexless marriages if everyone was thinking, oh, I could rape her, that's fine. It was never normal for there to be rapes in marriages. And, as I say, that it would be hard pressed to find one that wouldn't have been illegal under some other law. So, I think it's exaggerated as an issue, but there we go. Obviously a difficult and touchy subject. I didn't really want to go there, but yeah, it would be difficult to find a genuine rape that wasn't illegal for some other reason other than being a rape. I mean, the ironic thing is, of course, that was one of the functions of marriage. I often wonder what marriage was for. I've always been anti-marriage. I've never been pro-marriage. This isn't like a recent MGTOW thing. MGTOW's like the latest in a long line of reasons to be anti-marriage. I think as a teenager I was anti-marriage as a feminist, and then by the time I was in my 20s I was anti-marriage as a hippie, and then went through a phase of being anti-marriage as a pagan, although I was quite happy to have a, what do they call it now, binding ceremony or something. There's anti-marriage and anarchists. What's the state? State's got, they should have no involvement in my sexual relationships. And then now I'm anti-marriage and MGTOW. So it's quite, there's been no break in me being anti-marriage, just the ideological reason for being anti-marriage has changed. So I'm not going to be a big supporter of marriage, but that's a change in definition of marriage, isn't it? Because one of the functions of marriage was to prevent rape. It's prevent rape by having a system by which consent could be acknowledged by the entire community. No one can go, yeah, just all consent. They both consented. They both signed a document and they've consented to sex, and they're going to have children together. And we'll know that the children are his because they've also agreed that they're not going to have sex with anyone else, and they agreed to be together forever and ever. So we know that she's going to have financial obligations. It's a change in the definition of marriage. It's one of a series of changes in the definition of marriage. I think it makes me laugh when the tradcons are saying, "Oh, the homosexuals have changed the meaning of marriage." I think the homosexuals are a bit late to that party. I think we've been changing the definition of marriage for the last 200 years. I should do away with it. Just do away with marriage. Nonsense. It's just playing at it. We're just pretending. It's just pretend now. We do it. It's an excuse for pretend to be a princess day, isn't it? That's all it is. Especially as soon as we finished with it and we've got rid of alimony and maintenance and stuff, then there'll be nothing left of it. We're allies in destroying the institution of marriage. You should be congratulating us.
This is here, in North America, not some faraway place. No matter how much education has been attempted, we still have cops telling women that the risk of rape is based on how they dress. These are legitimate denial of rights that go even further in other parts of the world, and I think that reasonable, rational people can agree that there's still work to be done in this regard. The fact that some men get sexually assaulted too doesn't negate this fact.
There's two reasons to point that out. Firstly, it encourages men to talk about it. If they're reminded that this can happen to them too, it encourages them to talk about it. If they think that they're a rarity, they think that they are, it's the same with male victims of domestic violence. If they think they're a rarity and the whole world thinks they're a rarity, the whole world thinks it doesn't happen, then it makes it harder for them to talk about it. The second reason is it means that women don't have a monopoly on dictating the conversation on it as well. Because quite often, the topic of rape, you were talking about this before, you were talking about rape culture and the whole banging on about rape culture. The topic of rape is used to gain leverage in another topic, which is the topic of sexual etiquette. And by making that topic about rape rather than a topic about how courtship should take place, that gives women a monopoly over the topic, over the conversation, because they can then say, yeah, but you don't know what it's like to be raped. And you go, well, actually I might, for you know. I certainly know what it's like to be a victim of sexual harassment. And by sexual harassment, I don't just mean having my arse pinched on the tube. I'm talking about a prolonged period of sexual harassment in which this is when I was a schoolboy, so I was kind of young and withdrawn at the time. But yeah, I certainly know what it's like to experience some sort of unwanted sexual attention, and not just a one-off, but a campaign of unwanted sexual attention. I know what that's like. So yeah, there's two reasons. One is, if we are victims, we should be able to A, recognise it, and B, get it taken seriously when we talk about it. So it's important that other people know that happens to men too. That's why we bring that up. And the second reason why we bring it up is because just because it is that touchy subject doesn't mean that we don't have as much right to take part in that conversation. Because if we try to reduce the risk down to zero, we would also be eradicating all intimacy altogether. You see, there's a danger there. If you're trying to eradicate all possibility of unwanted sexual attention, then you would also be making wanted sexual attention almost impossible as well. Which is why I think they'll make a distinction between, one-off having my bottom pinched and, sexually inappropriate behaviour that I've experienced, with an actual experience of sexual harassment. Because harassment has to be more than once, otherwise it's not harassment. And for it to be harassment, the person doing it has to know that it's unwanted and do it anyway. And actually, the fact that it being unwanted doesn't stop them. In fact, it's part of the appeal to them because it gives them a feeling of power to do it. I think those are defining features of harassment. For it to be a harassment, it should be ongoing, unwanted, that the perpetrator knows that it's unwanted and that doesn't deter them, and the victim has made an attempt to communicate that the attention is unwanted. Otherwise it's not harassment. It's just an inconvenience, just an awkwardness, just an inappropriate behaviour. So
it should make for a stronger impetus to get to work on this. Many so-called anti-feminists don't object to public safety issues, but when I point out that sexual assault reduction has been a feminist issue for 40 years, they start quoting Dworkin, as if Andrea Dworkin and her acolytes own the desire that fewer people get raped. How does this make the world one bit better? The Dwork side has done a lot to make feminism look stupid, no denying that. But Dworkin was never the most mainstream voice in feminism.
There was a lot of Dworkin apologists, and as I say, Catherine McKinnon is significantly more influential than Dworkin. Not any more popular, I realise. I realise that she's not popular with mainstream feminists, but she is quite powerful. She has a powerful position. She's a legal advisor internationally. Gloria Steinem was in with that lot. Gloria Steinem is quite an influential feminist. Gloria Steinem was taken in by the satanic ritual abuse scares of the 1990s. You can't single her out as being a one-off. It's like you're kind of scapegoating Dworkin, saying, it's all Dworkin. We get rid of Dworkin, everything will be fine. No, everything won't be fine because you get rid of Dworkin. Dworkin didn't work alone. She had accomplices. And Susan Brownmiller. Actually, Susan Brownmiller is quite an influence, isn't she? Susan Brownmiller then influences Mary Koss. This rape culture panic that's going on right now, that's a direct line. You can follow that direct line. Not from Dworkin, but from Susan Brownmiller. Susan Brownmiller that made up the 2% of rape allegations are false, which is something we can't possibly know. She was the first one to put that in a pamphlet, and that's been quoted, and that is quoted even today, even though that was 1975. That same figure is quoted today to shut down the conversation about due process of law in regarding to rape cases. Now, with false allegations, there could actually be some common ground between feminists and men's rights activists. I read quite a good article by a feminist, Evans O'Brien. They wrote an article called "If You Want to End False Rape Allegations, Fight Slut Shaming," and I thought it was a good article. I kind of agreed with it. I kind of thought, yes, well, that's probably true. It's probably true that false rape allegations and purity culture have some overlap. But of course, it's a topic that most feminists won't discuss because they don't believe it exists. They don't believe false rape allegations exist. They insist that every rape allegation must be true. Only about a fortnight ago, I had to deal with a guy who was suicidal because his wife had made a false rape allegation against him for the 4th time. I did ask him why he was still with her. and he said he loved her. Which what can you do about these people? But he was feeling suicidal. I was there. I phoned the Samaritans for him. I didn't know you could phone the Samaritans for somebody else. Vicariously phone the Samaritans. I phoned the Samaritans for him. I had to hold his hand in the taxi, taking him to his mother, so he had somebody to watch him. Put him on suicide watch. It's not very helpful for men like him, is it? To have lie that only 2% of rape allegations are false, repeated ad infinitum. To derail any conversation about false rape allegations, which is a serious issue. And really it's a serious issue for women too, because of course, whilst false rape allegations exist, whilst women use them, it makes it harder to have real rape cases taken seriously.
Nor was she terribly strong on policy. If anti-feminists truly don't oppose women and only oppose what they perceive to be mainstream modern feminist rhetoric, then I don't understand why they focus on fringe comments that were never mainstream in the first place. I understand concerns about some of the things that Lena Dunham has said, because she's a celebrity with influence on young women. But Dworkin? Dworkin's work was an intellectual herpes sore that managed to scream and whisper at the same time.
Alright, this is going to be awkward. I'm going to have to ask you to check your privilege, but it's, don't worry, it's very specific. In feminism, you can reject what you like because you're a woman. And you know what it's like to be a woman. That means that when you hear something stupid said by a feminist, you can go, well, I know that's stupid because I'm a woman and I don't feel like that. When you're a man being indoctrinated into feminism, it's a bit harder to reject somebody because you don't know what it's like to be a woman. So, whilst you can say, it's very easy for feminists to say, we'd reject Dworkin, it's a lot harder if you're a male feminist who has been indoctrinated into the movement. You come across something like Dworkin and you can't reject it because you don't know what it's like to be a woman. So the nightmarish side of feminism, you're powerless to reject. That's why it's so culty. That's why it's a cultish thing. And it's particularly cultish for those that it can point to as being sinners that need to repent. And that's what men indoctrinated into feminism are. They're sinners who need to repent. So, yeah, I think it's probably easier for you to pick and choose between which feminists you agree with, which ones you don't. I'll tell you, because this is it was a big liberating moment for me, and this is why, again, I say people like you do more good than harm. I was about 22, 23. I remember seeing a chat show or something where there was somebody possibly like, I may have even been Catherine McKinnon for all I know. Certainly, I didn't catch the name at the time, but looking back and trying to fit it in, I think it probably was Catherine. And it was one of these general sort of things on pornography and how pornography causes, basically how pornography is, so pornography is a rape manual type stuff. If it wasn't Robin Morgan, it was somebody else. And the interviewer did say she'd done some sort of like book saying that studies were that all pornography was about subjugation of women or something. I can't remember what she said. Anyway, the interviewer said, so how are you defining pornography? He said, well, I would define pornography as anything that subjugates women. And he, so, hold on, that was your conclusion. You can't have your conclusion and your definition being the same thing. Otherwise, that's a foregone, that is literally a foregone conclusion. Anyway, I watched this thing. Even the interviewer didn't count because he was a man. So seriously, these are confessions of a mangina here. I thought, well, of course he would say that. Men who don't get it. I did promise there'd be confessions of a mangina at some point when I started. thought I was going to do a series called Companions of Mankind. Anyway, and then there was a woman stood up in the audience, and she was a feminist. She was a feminist that was an editor for what's it called Black Lace. It was a book series of erotica for women. Came out. This is early 90s. It wasn't called Black Lace. I can't remember what it was. It wasn't very good, but it was at the same time as the Nexus paperback was coming out, and it was kind of like a similar thing, but for women. And she said, as a feminist, I find what you're saying quite offensive. I think you're trying to you are creating a sort of Victorian depiction of female sexuality. And I went, oh my God, she's right, she is. And it was suddenly a breakthrough moment, but I needed a woman because I was a male feminist. I'd been indoctrinated into this bloody movement. I needed a woman to stand up and say, that's all right. She's wrong. She's an idiot. And it's okay for you to disagree with her. I needed that. Because, what did I know? I was only a man. You can't understand that. That's why Dawkins is dead. You can go, oh, Dawkins is not damaging at all. She is if you're a feminist and you're male. Okay? And you don't understand that. So check your privilege, Liana. If you're a feminist, it helps a lot to be female because it means you can pick and choose about what you believe. If you're a male feminist, it's not so easy to pick and choose what you believe. Because you don't think you got the right to choose.
And Lena Dunham is a minority even in Hollywood. Beyonce, Katy Perry, Taylor Swift, and Nicki. This is the point where an anti-feminist will often bring up the joke that is modern feminist academia. This ignores the larger fact that most liberal arts academia is a joke. The problem is structural. The trend that's created these cultural studies programs are called interdisciplinary studies, which cherry pick things from various subjects to create narratives. It would be more productive to integrate works by and about women, gay people, people of different races, and indigenous cultures into the broader curriculum of sociology, anthropology, literature, history, and political science.
I don't understand, Liana. How's that harmful? It's really weird. You seem to be going, oh, anti-feminists, what they do is... And then you talk about things that feminists do. Well, that's what we rant about. Why are you having a rant about the things we have a rant about? I don't understand. Again, it's not our fault that women's studies courses exist. We didn't create them. Yeah, I agree. It would be better to have... I mean, I did psychology as my degree. And yeah, there's a lot of feminist ideas came through psychology. But yeah, it's a broad subject, and because it's a broad subject, it doesn't mean that theories that are particularly feminist friendly go unchallenged. You get any study you read in psychology, you'll find another study that says something completely different and debunks it. If anything, psychology kind of teaches us that no one knows anything. And to always be skeptical about anyone claiming to be an expert in psychology. So, yeah, from that point of view, it's good because you can read a feminist study and then you can read a study that's not feminist, and you can form a balanced viewpoint of the world rather than having just one world view. Reinforced over and over again, which is what women's studies is. It's an indoctrinating course rather than an academic course. I don't know why you're blaming us. Why are you blaming us for the existence of women's studies courses?
But there's more short-term money in signing undergraduates up for junk bachelor degrees. Of course, what these special interest structures do is attract radicals to teach these courses, which means only radicals continue to take these courses. There's absolutely nothing tempering the politics or opening up the echo chamber. Now, that doesn't mean there's no value in feminist study. Just instead of locking it up in a ghetto, universities should be insisting on legitimacy by making it part of larger faculties.
But rant against anti-feminism, you seem to be ranting at a lot of things that are anti-feminism. You seem nothing to be ranting at universities. I'm a bit confused. I feel like I got on a bus and it's not going where I intended, and I just suddenly looked up and gone, hello, this isn't Clapham. What? Why are you going out to universities now? I can't do anything about that. Anti-feminists can't do anything about that. Anti-feminists can't do anything about the way universities are structured. What's going on?
What the pop stars are required to do that academics aren't.
Oh, wait, right.
The feminists in the CoverGirl ads aren't real feminists. Says who? The only reason people like me have trouble getting messages out is that everyone is more interested in repeating the garbage spewed by the lunatic fringe.
Yeah, this is the one I said in the comment, so I'm going to repeat what I said in the comment. How are we not giving you oxygen, Liana? I subscribe to your channel. I have linked to your channel. I have linked to your channel on men's rights pages. I said, watch this video, it's rather good. I give you oxygen. Don't say I just draw attention to the mad feminists. I draw attention to the good ones as well. I draw attention to Camille Parlier. I draw attention to you. I draw attention to Christina Hoff Summers. I draw attention to Katie Roiphe. How many times have I recommended that somebody read The Morning After? You don't know. No reason why you should know. If you knew that, I'd rather think you were stalking me. A lot. I'm telling you, a lot. I'm always recommending that book. I've recommended Donna LaFramboise's book, The Princess at the Window, to people. I even recommend Angela Carter, actually. One of my favourite films is based on one of her short stories. In fact, one of the things I particularly like about Company of Wolves, because I was about to say, Angela Carter doesn't say anything about men's rights. Angela Carter doesn't even say anything about men's rights. I just recommend because she's a good author. But actually, in a way, she does, because Company of Wolves is about how misandry is used to control women's sexuality. Because the stories about wolves that are told to her by her grandmother are comparable, really, with the sort of rape crisis, epidemic panic that is going on, as a way of making women scared of men so that they're less likely to have sex with men. I mean, that's probably the cultural aim. Yeah, it's about demonizing men, isn't it? I mean, that's what the wolves are. Wolves represent men, and the grandmother's demonizing them in order to control her granddaughter's sexuality. That's what Company of Wolves is all about. Yeah, I recommend that book. But I'm not an anti-feminist. I don't know why I'm taking this matter so personally. I don't even identify as an anti-feminist. I am critical of feminism, and I'm not a feminist. I would consider myself an adversarial critic of our feminism, or an adversarial critic of feminists. I know a lot of people that have similar opinions to me that do describe themselves as anti-feminists, and the reason I don't is because I reason that feminism itself is such a nebulous word in terms of the multitude of ways that it's applied, that to say I'm an anti-feminist doesn't really say anything about me. And there would be people that describe themselves as anti-feminist that I completely disagree with. I don't think it's a meaningful term to use really to describe my position. To describe my position in opposition to something rather than describe my position in terms of what I'm for. I really appreciate what you did for the gamers during Gamergate. I really appreciate you standing up for them. And one of the reasons I appreciate it is because you had a voice that was taken more credibly than we would have been. We knew we weren't going to take it credibly. So the thing is, people begin sentences, people begin articles saying, as a feminist, I think this, because you know that being a feminist is going to get you taken seriously. No one starts articles saying, as an MRA, I think this, because we know that as soon as we say, as an MRA, everyone's going to turn up and go, oh, one of those. I appreciate what you did. This is why I say you do more good than harm. How can you say that no one draws attention to the good feminists? Nobody draws attention to you. The fact of the matter is, I'm a men's rights activist, so it doesn't matter who writes on a men's issue. I'll support them. I don't care if they identify as a feminist or not. Natasha Devon writes an article on men's body issues, men's steroid abuse because they're made to feel like they're not manly because they don't have muscles. I'll share that article. That's an article on an issue I want to talk about. If, as I say, when you were talking about Gamergate, we were sharing you. We draw attention to the feminists that we want to support. And, you know, to say they're doing well. We complain about the feminists that think they're doing stuff for men's rights and then actually round up talking about toxic masculinity instead and think in some way that helps to tell people they're toxic, because it doesn't. I can tell you that right now. Even the very suggestion that it would be fine to talk about toxic masculinity, we were going to talk about positive masculinity as well, and counterbalance talking about toxic masculinity, we talk about toxic femininity, but that doesn't happen, does it? Those feminists that think they're talking about men's issues, but they just wind up blaming men for them all, we criticise, quite rightly. The ones that are actually drawing attention to men's issues genuinely, when Hannah Rosin was drawing attention to the male victims of rape, we drew attention to her. We draw attention to the ones that are doing good as well as the ones that are doing harm. I suppose there's a difference between, you know, the MRAs who are anti-feminist for a reason. You know, even the traditional anti-feminists are anti-feminist for a reason, aren't they? It's anti-feminist for a less good reason. More conservative, uptight reason. Conservative fear of change reason. I don't have time for those anti-feminists. They're just anti-feminists because they're afraid of change. I'm critical of feminism when I think it's doing harm to men, specifically, and when I think it's doing harm to boys, specifically. And when it's not, I'll leave it alone. And when it's doing some good, I'll draw attention to that as well and be supportive of it. We do tend to act surprised though when you do. Since I go, what is it? I volunteer on the alternative universe. Yeah, but we will draw attention when feminists are doing good. Of course, we're going to draw attention when they're doing harm. They're doing harm to us. Why would we not? Wendy McElroy, she's another that's a very good feminist that I would share one of her articles. And you're right, the radical feminists are getting better deals, aren't they? They're getting large pay packets. Wendy McElroy used to be a published author. I remember seeing her books in bookshops. She's got a book out now. I think it's only available on the internet. It's one of those ones where you're gonna pay. One of those ones where it only gets published every time somebody buys it. She used to be in bookshops. She's not mainstream anymore. Why? She was mainstream at one point. During the 90s, Wendy McElroy was mainstream. And now she isn't. You're right. But it's not us giving the radicals more attention. It's not us. It's the book publishers. It's the newspapers. It's the media. Why are you blaming us for the media? Yeah, if you can get the radicals out of the media, that'd be great. I'll be happy with that. Getting the radicals out of the media would be something that we could both work on. You got to get yourself into the media. You got to get the moderate feminists into the media. I don't know how to do that. I'll say, I'll share a link to a Wendy McElroy article or a Camille Parlier article or Kathy Young. Kathy Young's very good. No one's offering them the book deals. So I've managed to piece that back together like a bit of archaeology because I accidentally deleted it. So that was part 2. And the ending of part 2 conclusion of part 2 is pretty non-existent. So this is a re-recorded ending for part 2. Just to say, you're not going on to part 3 now. You got a prologue to part 3, because what happened between editing together part 2 first time round and editing together part 3 was she did a feedback Friday. And the feedback Friday sort of changed my changed the direction a little bit, because it was a bit disappointing. There's a lot of fun. The prologue to part 3 is a lot of fun, as long as you're not afraid of kittens. You're not afraid of kittens, are you?